Here in this foundation video, I think it's really critical that we cover one of the most basic and sometimes overlooked things is just gun safety. Shooting is truly one of the safest sports out there you can get, but it's because most people get the correct training. I think we're going to cover some topics, but I think it's important that you get, if you're a beginning shooter, that you get some of this hands-on from an instructor that'll help you see this stuff. But gun safety is really critical, really important in a sense of obviously not getting hurt or hurting anyone else. But there's some basic rules that we always want to follow. We want to use eye protection. We're shooting moving targets. The pieces of clay, we don't want to get hit in the eye. Same thing with on a sporting clay course, you should never have shot fall as an issue, but in hunting scenarios or in some overlooked aspects of the game, occasionally you can have shot falling on the cage, and obviously we want some protection around our eyes. We don't want to get hit in the eye with anything. We need ear protection. The guns are loud. That's a fact. We want to be wearing ear protection at all times. We're never on the course. We're never going to load the gun till we're in the cage and the gun's facing a safe direction. We're never loading more than 2 shells. Obviously, in an over and under, the gun will only hold 2, but in a semi-auto, they can hold 3 or more shells. It's important that we're only shooting pairs. We're only shooting 2 targets at a time at the most. So we're never going to have more than 2 shells in the gun. That way, when you fire on the clay targets or on the presentation, you're not going to turn around and have a loaded gun. That gun's going to empty. And if you didn't shoot both shots or something happens and you need to unload the gun, you need to unload the gun in the cage with the gun still facing a safe direction. We're not going to leave the shooting position until that gun's safe. We're going to carry the guns with the action open. The barrel on a semi-auto, we want to point up in the air. We don't want to point down on the ground. If there was an accident and the shot went off facing straight up in the air, as that shot falls down on us, big deal. It's not going to hurt. If you shot down, if you had the barrel carrying it down and you shot into the ground, in some soft dirt, it might not be an issue, but if you're around any kind of concrete or asphalt, that shot can ricochet off and hit somebody or something that you're not trying to shoot. It's a lot of common sense. We just want to be safe. You're not going to point that gun at anything or anybody you're not willing to shoot. That's guns in general, but on a sporting clay course, it's important. I get a lot of parents asking me what's a good age to start their kids shooting, and it has a lot to do with safety. In my opinion, it's when the kid is big enough to load the gun themselves, carry the gun themselves, unload the gun themselves, obviously be very safe with it. And that's a maturity level. It's not an age thing. So it's a strength and size issue, but also a maturity to be safe as it applies to safety, because that's critical. We don't want any kids out there that are shooting that aren't mature enough to understand the importance of the same gun safety stuff. In safety and sporting clays, I think another key thing to remember is, in terms of safety, would be how popular sub-gauge is. We got at every one of these big shoots, we've got 20 gauge, 28 gauge, 410. It's critically important if you're shooting sub-gauge to manage your ammo. One of the most dangerous things that can happen around a gun club would be basically dropping a 20 gauge shell into a 12 gauge gun. When you get done shooting that 20 gauge event, it's really critical that you put that ammo away and get it away from your 12 gauge. If you had a loose 20 gauge shell in your pocket and you just reach down and accidentally drop that shell in your 12 gauge over and under, and then you look down and you think, oh, I forgot to put a shell in, and you put a 12 gauge shell in behind it, that's a big problem. That 20 gauge shell will drop down a 12 gauge barrel and it'll get lodged just past the forcing cone. And as you look down, that hole's just going to look dark. You're not going to think anything's in the chamber. And it's very easy to put a 12 gauge shell behind it. That basically made a pipe bomb. That 12 gauge shell will go off and ignite the 20 gauge shell further down in the barrel to where the thickness of the barrel is not made for that explosion or that shell to go off, and the barrel will rupture. The gun will be ruined. It'd be a bad day. But just be very, very careful when you're shooting sub-gauge ammo around other other gauges. 20 gauge shells are all yellow. There's a reason for that. That's for caution. No matter what brand 20 gauge shell you're purchasing, it's going to be yellow, and that is for safety. That's to keep them away from those 12 gauge guns. This is one of the most safe sports possible. That's partly because I think most people do a really good job of teaching or informing new shooters and getting them started on a safe journey. I've been shooting this game for over 30 years. I've got over 200,000 registered NSCA targets, probably 500,000 rounds shot in my career lifetime. And I have yet to see a serious accident on the sporting clay range. Virtually none. I've never even been around a gun blowing up, even though that does happen. Knock on wood, that won't happen to me. My parents stressed safety from the very beginning. I think it's important for everybody.